Welcome back to Dear Future, where we meet the visionaries reshaping our creative landscapes with innovation and heart. I am Suki, your host, and today I'm thrilled to introduce you to Andrew Reid. He is a creative strategist who's helping define the future of music and visual storytelling. Andrew started out in pop rock music videos, and today, as VP of Creative Strategy at Atlantic Records, he oversees the full artistic vision for some of the industry's biggest names: album art, music videos, marketing, and everything in between. But it is his use of AI that sets him apart. Andrew's created over 20,000 AI music tracks and fine-tuned thousands of variations of a single song, pushing the boundaries of how AI and human creativity can work together to produce something entirely new. Today in this conversation, we'll dive into Andrew's creative journey, his hopefully unique philosophies on using AI for music, and thoughts on how technology is transforming the way we connect with art and sound.
This idea that everything's been done before can be challenged.
I've been dreaming of a computer like this my whole life.
It really made me think more about how our brains work.
It's not coming from anywhere else. It's only coming from us.
Dear Future.
Andrew, welcome to Dear Future.
Thank you. No, it was a really robust intro. Thank you for all the nice things that you said.
Are they true?
Yeah, I think mostly that's true in a way. I wouldn't say that I got my start with pop music, but definitely my start at my current role.
That's awesome. So let's go back to where it all started. I want to know the story behind the story.
I'd say, without going back too far, the creative headspace that I was involved in for a long time was called the Clubhouse. It was in Brooklyn, and it was what I call commune. There was about 100 artists that lived in this house over a course of about 10 years. And I had worked with a group of friends of mine to put it together. And then over the years, I kind of led the house to many different iterations. You know, I was already a songwriter and had made films before the house. But when I was in that space, it was really constant collaboration, constant productivity. Instagram had just started. People were starting to make content every day, upload it to the internet. People weren't really making money on social media yet. We were just figuring out what to make and post all the time. And record labels were crashing because of post-Napster era. So for us, we were just figuring everything out. Prosumer cameras at the time is what we called them, like not cinema grade, but not VHS, dad cams. But yeah, so we were making just a ton of music. It was mostly musicians, producers, songwriters, directors, editors that lived in this house. So, you know, people that had played in Prince's band. I was producing for like Theophilus London. I did some tracks with Freddie Gibbs. Hip hop side, I was doing a lot of hip hop stuff. Bands that were touring. I was probably in 10 or 20 different bands at the time. Just everybody had their own project. So for me, the process of ideating and collaborating and doing as much creative things as possible, that's kind of where it all started.
Okay, so you're a musician, you're a creative strategist, you kind of work with these full suite production companies, you kind of know the gamut of social impact campaigns in their own special way. But where did this all start? Like, were you a musician when you were a kid? How did you get your start?
Yeah, so I was kind of raised in church music groups. And so my dad played, my brother played, and my group of friends kind of picked up the guitar when we were single digits age. From there, developed into a lot of other different creative tools, whether other instruments, picked up cameras. Again, like this is the era before like Sony A7S and, you know, like we were just figuring out how to use editing software. So we were just shooting. Nobody was teaching us how to do it. There wasn't online tutorials. It was just shoot something, figure out how to edit on like iMovie or Final Cut way back in the day. From there, all throughout college, I was making stuff. You know, I was taking courses. I did film classes and things like that.
So it seems like this approach has always been like a super scrappy music and film.
Yeah.
Always together, kind of maxed out for the resources that you have, just pushing everything as far as you can go.
Yes.
Did you always know that you wanted to work in music videos or in this space, or was it kind of an organic thing that unfolded? Like, did you have some grand vision of where you were going?
Yeah, the grand vision was really what the Clubhouse was. I was always like, I want to move to New York. I want to live with all my friends and I want to make music and have a record label and we're going to make music videos. And that was the vision. So my ticket to New York was that Teach for America. So I was like teaching in East New York in Brownsville and underserved communities. And I asked for a school with a recording studio. So I got a school with a recording studio. So I worked there full time. And that was kind of where the dream came about, was like I took a couple of years as like having a full-time job in New York, staked out where I could have a house. But then we had a house in South South Brooklyn. And I figured out how to get the house and bring all my friends together and make stuff. So yeah, it was super scrappy. And it was a scrappy time in media because people didn't know what the next model was. Streaming hadn't came about for music, movies, and series. So it was either you were making really big productions or you were super scrappy. And I was super scrappy.
Right.
Really up until, not that many years ago when I was working with Atlantic or doing some ad agency work and working on commercials.
Oh, that's awesome. I think one of the things that's most interesting, especially about this time, is there's a lot of confusion, right, around like what people do with AI. And from that point at Clubhouse, moving into music videos and moving into Atlantic Records and what you're doing now, what was that journey like? And how did you get to this place where you're at, where you're really working bigger budgets, bigger strategies, you're working, at a very large company, kind of overseeing ways that other creatives do their work? What was that journey like?
It was a lot of making stuff at any cost all the time. The Clubhouse was just that. For me, the vision was figure out a way so that nobody had to worry about paying the rent. That sort of happened in some ways or another. But, as a creative, you solely want to focus on making stuff until it makes money. And not everything you make makes money. So the task for me was just to continue to make it at any cost possible. Eventually, I made my way out to LA after about 10 years in New York. And when I came out here, I opened up the office for a marketing agency that a friend of mine from high school had started.
Wait, but what happened to Clubhouse? Did you take it with you?
With Clubhouse, we had a team of people that came in and invested in it. We rebranded it a little bit. And one of the main founders and investor passed away in the process. And so from there, it kind of got a little bit disintegrated over time. My hope was to continue doing it in LA. And I did actually have a couple different places that I've done out here in LA that are similar to it, but not on quite of the scale.
I'm sorry.
No, everything sort of takes its course. And I think that we had a really good amount of time where we continued that. And I think for me in my personal life, I was holding it together. And then when I moved on, it was sort of time for it to move on as well.
Yeah.
But yeah, so when I came out to LA, I had like Anheuser-Busch as a client. So I was working on the commercial side a lot as sort of get my bearings in LA.
Mm-hmm.
That was where the budget started to scale and me taking a more visual approach on like an enterprise level. So from there, as I started working on a lot of projects on the commercial side, I also got pulled into APG and Atlantic, and I had done a lot of music videos as an artist with my friends and other artists that I had worked with. And, we built somewhat of a production company out of the Clubhouse as well. So making videos and making documentaries was something that I had done a long time. But yeah, so that's kind of how I came back to being on the music side of things, not just the video side, which is what I do at the agency. And with Atlantic, I definitely have run the full scale, starting with like really young artists is when I came in, and then over time building up the budgets and the campaign size and things like that, and then working with 100 plus artists at Atlantic now.
So tell me, what does it mean to be the VP of strategy? What do you strategize?
Creative strategy, I think, is what I do, but my title is actually just VP of Creative. Only separating because they are separate roles.
Right.
But so I basically sit with the artist or artist team, and we come up with the visual identity and visual vision for an artist. Sometimes, that's really the creative director's role. And so a big part of my job is helping either find the creative director or equip the creative director with the right resources, work through what the entire campaign is going to be like from a visual side. It's a visual brand of an artist, so it's very important. It's very much tied into the art. And I think that ultimately my goal is always to move the creative visual process closer and closer to the music creative process. And I really don't think that they're separated. I think that's an important piece that has been difficult to bridge from the label side. But as an artist, it's so intuitive that you can never separate the music and the visual, especially in our era now where they're so close, connected, and tight.
Yeah. And from this position where you are altering and thinking about the world building of an artist's identity, what brought you to test out AI and what caught your attention?
I mean, MidJourney, I think, changed me for sure. I can remember having like a low-key mental breakdown after I used every good AI tool will bring me to my knees. Like every good AI tool has that moment where it's just like, oh my gosh, I'm broken. Like what I thought was the world is now totally different. And I think that happens to me like once a month, but it was so natural actually. The evolution of what I was trying to do at the Clubhouse was actually very similar to AI. It was about iteration. How many different versions of something can I make? I always had this idea for an app that was, I start a song, upload it, and all my friends are on the app and they get get it and they use that little sample and they make a song. Then they upload that and then somebody else samples it. And each little idea was a seed and the seed would grow a tree. And lame concept, but at the end of the day, it was all about how many different ways can you do something and how many different directions can you take an idea. And that's what AI is to me. And I think I'm truly obsessed with not only how many different ways, but letting the process go into infinity with AI. Like everything that I get to is like, how can I make a process that continues to create into infinity? You know, that's sort of the exponential curve of the parabola. You know, how do I get there with creativity? I think my mind's always trying to hover around that point where you just can see the curve of a process going on forever.
To ground it a little bit, I want to know, what were the first things that you made and what got you started?
With AI?
Yeah, with AI specifically.
I mean, again, I started with MidJourney, and I think that was a big thing. So first I was just trying to understand the tool. It was a similar time period of like ChatGPT era. And I think between trying to understand how creative the voice of ChatGPT could be.
Yeah.
So I would try to train the model on a specific type of tone that would not only create a character development and a narrative baked into it, but also be in the format of a MidJourney prompt. So then I could copy and paste it in MidJourney. So again, my goal was to always create a voice for myself using AI and then use that voice to create some sort of physical asset, you know? And I think that for me was the early things I was doing. It's just different combinations. Again, all about process that involves some sort of human input, adjusting it to be something that can be replicated and then how that outputs into something. So I was just making a lot of tools like that, like a different
little machines.
Like, yeah, I mean, this kind of went viral is that people were like making MidJourney, like Wes Anderson, Harry Potter, you know, or something like that. Before that, I had created a Wes Anderson generator and would give me a character brief of a Wes Anderson film that had never been written. But in that brief, there would be like the character description and a narrative synopsis. And then I'd have a MidJourney prompt. And then I would use like 11 labs to make the MidJourney photo talk and the voice. That was like my first go-to thought. And I think since then, I've just been making machines that make worlds, you know, in every direction possible. And I think that everything that I've done since has sort of built on that logic.
Okay, so tell me about some of these other mechanisms, these other machines you've built. What are they doing and what are they building?
Yeah, I mean, I have to admit that like the machines aren't built. I'm not a coder, and I think right now my focus is on like how do I build things without knowing code and like through Claude and Sonnet and stuff. That's kind of where I'm at right now, is to complete the loop with the machines, is make them actually go. But yeah, I mean, the current universe that I exist in right now, which is this hole that I go into every night, and it's mostly using Suno, which is generative music app, but I have thousands of songs that I've written over the years. And so I'm taking my old music and old lyrics and putting it into Suno. And I have created sort of this character I call Tom Drost. And Tom Drost is sort of like a fractal character. It's off the Drost effect, I believe is what it's called. When you look into two mirrors and it goes off into infinity.
Yeah.
You know, so Tom Drost is my AI artist character. And I have made 10,000 versions of this one song that I wrote many years ago called Love is Electric. And along with that, every version sort of has a parallel universe version of Tom Drost.
The multiverse of Tom Drost.
Correct. So it's the 1983 Tulsa, Oklahoma country version of Tom Drost. It's the 1937 Southern blues Muddy Waters version of Tom Drost. It's the My Buddy Valentine 1991 playing at Glastonbury version of Tom Drost.
Wow.
So the photos come with it, and then the songs, you know, I adapt them to be that specific time period or something. And so I have 10,000 versions right now.
How did you get to 10,000 and why 10,000?
I have tendinitis because I don't know how to make code. And so I'm literally just pressing generate over and over again and saving everything. And like, so everything's hand done, which is absurd. I'm sure that there's people like, oh, I could have wrote the code for that in 5 seconds. I just not the code guy. So I don't know how to make it go on its own. Manually is how I do that.
That's incredible. Okay, so while you're building the worlds of Tom Drost, in what ways does it reflect on the other work you're doing, world building other artists' images? Do they play? Do they talk to each other?
They're getting closer. Yeah, the points are lining up. I feel like I'm pioneering a little bit. I'm definitely digging ahead, you know, and I feel like especially in a corporate scenario, that's one piece. Being a company that has pretty high standards for being legally compliant, artists whose integrity is very important, and artists who aren't necessarily on the AI wave yet or don't care to be. So there's a fine line to walk between those things. But there are a lot of artists that are adopting, various AI things. And I think just helping people through that process as it comes is one piece. And that's sort of going on right now. We're definitely always talking about how to leverage AI in some way or another. One example that I know we've used is like Charlie XCX. We did some listening parties and listening events to play the album, and she cloned her voice and then used that as a part of, seamlessly moving between tracks in a listening party. And there was other uses, in various elements that voice came into play. But yeah, across the projects, a lot of times, we're experimenting and just ideating things and ideas, and, a lot of the pitch processes for projects or videos. Recently, I made a video for a redesign of our office, and I used AI to imagine the space and then Runway to animate it, and, AI'd some of our artists' music and put it as a soundtrack. So I think that there are a lot of entry points for it, but it's still very early just because of the garden nature of IP and music.
Right.
Yeah.
What would you say is the thing that's most exciting to you about it? Like, you are somebody who is an early adopter. You are a scrappy creative. You are also someone who is very much a representative of gatekeeping. And you're also just an expansive, creative human. And so with all of those things, seeing AI, I have existential crises all the time. Sounds like you also do too. What are the things that get you through the fears and the anxieties that come up?
I feel like I'm a superhuman, when I'm on it. And the creativity is so endless that it elevates my abilities to such a level that I feel like, why wouldn't anybody want to do this, and experience what this is like? One of the trickiest parts about imagination is that it's always fleeting. And for an absent-minded creative, which I am, there are too many ideas to hold on to. And I think that what ultimately AI has done for me as a creative is allowed for me to not only remember my ideas, but then to organize them, to archive them, and allow me to come back to them easily, searching and remembering and using ChatGPT and literally just asking it, hey, have we ever talked about this before? Or did I tell you that thought I had about this? And it be like, yeah, we did talk about it. And these were your thoughts on it. That's just so powerful for any artist or creative to have archives of your creativity. And I think that, again, for any artist to see the potential of not only empowering you to be more creative, imagine more things, but also to be more in touch with your patterns of thinking and patterns of creative. I think that's where I see such a monstrous impact on any artist's life. And that's really what I'm trying to communicate to people. So really it's on a process level. In fact, when I sit down and I show like head of A&R or, big CEO types, what AI does, very oftentimes their interpretation is surface level. Like, oh, well, I wouldn't release that song. That's not a good song, but I think that the implications on process are so profound that unless you're an artist, sometimes you'll miss it. But I talked to so many artists and producers who are already using AI devices and tools. I mean, we've been using it for years, packed to plugins and things like that with music and video editing. But yeah, I mean, I think people just on the iterative level, process level, that's where it's getting the most use and where it has the most practical application. As these models become more powerful and more specific and perhaps more human relevant creative, or the ingenuity of like a human becomes more baked in to the creative side of some of these models, I feel like they'll become more practical competitors in the generative sense. But yeah, for right now, I feel like just like the power process is so overwhelming.
I mean, outside of just the pure iteration, I have an idea, I can get it down, and I can get this idea 10,000 times in different ways. Outside of speed and efficiency, are there other ways that it's affected your creative process, like how you think about making or how it happens?
Yeah, it bleeds into everything. I think the process of creating the medium, like for editing and video, there's a lot of complicated equipment and people that you need to make things feel really big in video production. I think the obvious thing is that I don't need all those people, so that there's an efficiency to getting my ideas out, which I think is the most powerful piece for me, is that I can get to a completed idea much quicker, as opposed to before I needed these people to be able to get my ideas out to even know if it was a good idea or if it was to know that I'm on the right path. So I think that for one, the quickness that I can understand that what I'm imagining is practical or a good idea, in fact, because I can look at it outside of my imagination. I think that's one side where it's affected my process tremendously. But I think the other thing is it changes the way we interact or our relationship to creativity. When you're playing an instrument, I feel like it's so organic and there's something very visceral and vibrational about it, and that's still an important part of my process, is things that I've created, with that energy that stems from physical movement. And like when you're singing or when you're playing guitar, you're very much physically involved with it. Making videos is a little bit different. If you're holding a camera or something like that. That's not where I sit with the creative process on the visual side. But yeah, being able to look at all of the ideas and the iterations and choose allows the process to be more strategic and also more heady, I guess. It's like more, I'm using my brain more than I'm using my heart, which I think in a way you could criticize that. But I think, again, like what is the substance or the data or where does that come from? If it's still coming from a creative heart center, I think that iteration is such a powerful piece that you use on. So I still feel like the process is important that it starts from human ingenuity.
What are the hardest things about it for you? I mean, I will just say personally, I have my own issues and challenges, but I'm curious in your process, musically, visually, what are the things that you really struggle with?
First struggle is there's just too much. I got 10,000 versions of a song. I can't even listen to all those. I think it would take me like 3 years to listen to 10,000 songs. I don't even know. No, I mean, I have been fully overwhelmed with the amount of options that come out of it. So I think that that's a problem that I'm trying to figure out is, okay, so I can iterate all day, but where am I going? I don't really know. So I'm still in this phase. I got on this train and I'm just making shit, And I think from that point, I don't really know what else. And I think that's a problem because I don't finish stuff. I think it's really just about making it, but I'm still making it. And I think that that's good. The other side of it is tools aren't there yet. So there's still huge holes that I feel like is the next thing. I mean, like, I think we've all been waiting for generative video to get on point, and obviously we've been waiting for things like Sora or things that are kind of right there that haven't been released, but I think that they're important to the next place we're getting to where we can imagine our ideas and see them. Hollywood's waiting. We're Black Mirroring the situation and sizing it up from existential crisis side as well. But yeah, I mean, I don't know where the tools are taking us, but they're very much guiding where we're going. It's not a problem, but I do feel like there's still gaps. And again, I think another gap for me is how to make these little machines run. Even on the professional side, my goal is to make these machines, and I call them machines because they're like thinking apps. They're a little bit more than just software and code.
They're thoughtful bots.
Yeah, exactly. Like the Comfy UI model is interesting where you're just putting apps together, and like this chain of apps. And I think like that is what AI represents for me too, is just like machines that are connected up to each other and talking. And I think that we're just getting to that point where that really makes sense as a flow and a process. And that's where I always run up against resistance, is that I can't chain certain things together to make what I see in my head. So,
right.
But we're almost there.
Maybe just even in tying it back to some of the work that you're doing right now for artists that you're working with, people who work at these companies, but I think mostly for the artists, how do you talk to them about these tools in a way that they feel invited into the process of creating?
There's really easy tools like MidJourney and Runway where when you have something that you've made and you put it in and it takes something that you've already made and makes it into something different. That's the easiest way that I like to demonstrate. Like somebody brought in a photo shoot they had done. I felt like it was missing something. I was just like, it's a little flat. Like obviously it hasn't been colored yet. There's no post-production, post-processing. There's no 3D things that we put in the photo yet. And we were looking at the selects and I threw one into Runway really fast and I animated it and little things came out. It was like a water shot and little bubbles came out. I was like, see, now already it looks different. And they're like, oh yeah, that's really cool. Like the bubbles came up and I was like, yeah, so maybe we should go in and do some bubbles here in post. I think once you show how easy it is, I think it then allows people to think out loud, so to speak. And that's where I like to start because it's super simple. But yeah, and it's a little bit of education of the tools, right? There's like some major tools out here that really work well for creativity and visual identity. And I think just educating people on the tools and then just giving a little bit of sample. I think on the philosophical side, it's still like, well, where's this data coming from? Did this model train somebody else's stuff? And I think that it's an easier gap to close when you're uploading yours, that what you've created, and that's like a song or photo that you've taken, and then using that as sort of the foundation, even though the model might have been still using other data to manipulate that one piece, but it at least gives the experience of your own thing being changed. And I think that that's where people can start to see the implications of, oh, this is just another tool that I can use to help make my stuff more interesting, stuff that I've created from my hands, essentially, and then can manipulate just the same way that a distortion pedal manipulates the guitar.
It's so interesting too how like what the world of plugins did to music. I feel like we're sort of seeing the analogs with AI and just seeing like the ways that you can distort an image in all these different ways without VFX.
Yes.
And the new revelation that like I can generatively edit
Yeah.
my footage? Like, what does that mean?
Yeah, exactly.
I think you are at an interesting vantage point. Not only are you a creative, but you're also in the industry. I'm curious if you have any insights or perspectives from conversations with people in these kinds of rooms around like the climate and what it feels like and what you feel is the moving forward, what's happening in these spaces.
Yeah. I think that there was a knee-jerk response to Napster, and it generated so much fear that people have two perspectives now. One is, yes, you need to defend yourself against new technology because it will take an entire industry down.
It will come for you.
Yeah, it will come for you. That was a big wake-up call. And I think the first response, knee-jerk, protect IP, who are we suing? And I think that is still something that wall is slowly coming down or being solidified, one or the other, a little bit of both. Yeah, like, yeah, we can let some of this stuff in, but we're screening everything. Don't try to do anything.
Still think about it.
Yeah. And then the other side of it is we need to adopt or get taken over by it, right? So I think that there's now not only just a warming up to it, but a strategizing. It started with financial side of things. I think like productivity inside the workspace, not so much touching IP and creative because that's more difficult to understand, but we're getting there. We have models that have popped up that are ethically trained. I think that's helped some people. Mike Karen and some people are doing with Jen, I think is interesting because it's trained on art and music that's already been licensed for AI, that they updated their contracts, I think, and adapted the relationship with their published artists so that it's legally sound. But yeah, I mean, I think the floodgates are going to open somewhere or another. We're going to realize that, it is very similar to plugin, or it's very similar to other tools that we use. And so I feel like where we are in the climate right now is, again, sort of making the defense a little bit lower, but solidifying our stance that we are going to let AI into this space, but be careful so that we're not taken down or not protecting ourselves too much so that we miss the wave. Those are conversations that we're having every day, and one little thing gets by and we're allowed to use it in this way, but these ways we're not. And again, if you're generating something and then just slapping it on to album art, that's really not the direction that we're going. But if you're creating things in the context of using tools to get to a product that really still feels handmade and leverages the artist's intuition and ingenuity, I think that makes perfect sense, and we're moving in that direction.
I think I'm going to say that to my husband every single time that we get in a fight. Who are we suing?
Who are we suing?
Who are we suing? I think that makes a lot of sense. And I think it's also very like grounded in how reality feels.
Yeah.
Whereas like sometimes if it's just media perspectives, it can feel very much like, oh my God, what's happening? The world is falling apart. How are we going to survive? And it feels really grounded to be in a position where you're sort of like, well, it's not going to kill us, but it's also has some challenges. And how do we find ourselves in the middle?
Yeah.
For you personally, outside of all the business stuff, outside of representation, is there anything you're just so stoked to make like in the next few months, in the next year?
I'm just continuing to build out the Tom Drost world. I have a back house. I put security cameras in there because that's the footage that I'm going to be taking. So it just, every time I walk in, these little AI cameras follow me everywhere around the room. I create a bunch of stuff and then I leave. But that's like my space that Tom Drost exists. I mean, I have like thousands of songs that I wrote and recorded organically pre-AI. So I'm just going through the archives, and that's what I'm most excited about personally. And I think that it will bleed into my work with other artists. I just haven't connected the dots for it yet. But I think that we're doing a lot of image and likeness research. We just did it with Lil Uzi, where we replicated him into the AI world. Not him, it was actually an alien that was in his video. But like that, leveraging people's image and likeness, I think is really exciting. And that's the research that I've been doing on Tom Drost, is like, how do I leverage myself, not only for photos, videos, talking, being able to exist as Tom Drost in different dimensions, essentially, and the multiverse. And so I feel like once the tool gap closes, like it's not quite there to where the video really makes sense. It's actually hard to take a photo and make it move naturally, or make, generate a video to where it really feels like an image and likeness of somebody. Everybody, I feel like, feels it coming, but that's going to be so polarizing, but also exciting to see what's possible. So, right now I feel like you take a photo of somebody, you take a 360 scan, and you'll be able to put them in anything. Even a 360 4-dimensional scan is what they were saying, and that makes it so you can go video game or anything. And I think that space I'm very excited about. And I thought we were there like 2 years ago. We're not, but I feel like we're there almost right now. But yeah, I mean, there's new things like Runway came out, this Act 1 or Act 2. What do they call that? That's helps your mouth move. And I think that that's really important. That's been waiting for that one. Image and likeness is like the big thing that from the creative standpoint, I feel like we're all waiting for. And I'm very excited to see where that takes us. And I'm interested to see who allows us to do that first.
Let the race begin.
I know.
I mean, it's been going, but
Yeah, I know. It's in full force.
so yeah. Is there anything that you would really recommend listeners of the show go watch, things that you've done with any artists that are really cool use cases of AI that you would really want to get people excited about?
No, I mean, not anything crazy at the moment. From the projects that I've been around, the Uzi case is a pretty cool example of it. And you might not know it. That's what was done. I think that's kind of the point too, is that it just looks like anything else that somebody would have shot.
That's great.
Yeah.
Okay, final question.
Mm-hmm.
What would you tell the future now, knowing what you know? How would you address it in a very short, succinct sentence?
Yeah. Okay. So, dear future, let us into the multiverse. I would like to be able to tune myself into different dimensions. So the future, if you could bring us the channel tuner to other dimensions, that would be appreciated.
Sincerely, Andrew.
Sincerely, Andrew.
Perfect. It's a great end.
Yes.
Well, thank you for being on our show.
Yes, thank you. Any day I can come and talk about AI.
Thank you, Andrew, for sharing your wisdom, your insights, your journey, your experiences to get here. Your work reminds me, and hopefully all of us, that creativity isn't about replacing the human touch, but expanding it, discovering new possibilities that we never imagined with what is right under our noses. So to our listeners, if you're as inspired as we are by Andrew's experiences, make sure to follow his work as he continues to break new ground in music and visual storytelling. Until next time, please keep pushing boundaries. Sometimes the most powerful innovation happens where art and technology meet. Do not forget to show up for it. This is Dear Future, signing off.
Dear Future.